Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We have a very special guest today, Mike Catherwood. You got a really interesting life story.
Thanks. Yeah, I do. I don't know if it's interesting in like a it's so amazing, my ambition, but like how wildly eclectic it is.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Well, it's what's interesting to me is how so many of us have gone through such disparate experiences and arrived at the same general points, right? Which it probably shouldn't be surprising to me, because every new like philosophy breakthrough we in the West have these days is really just an appeal back to 2,000-year-old Stoics. You know what I mean? So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel every time. We just think we're super unique, and we go through life and we're like, oh, this is actually pretty easy. We should have been doing this the whole fucking time.
And you're seeing that not only most clearly, I think, and most like it's most prolific in the self-help kind of improvement world, but you see it in everything. Like in entertainment, you see stuff like where people are applauding how cutting edge it is, and you're like, someone did this, like Buster Keaton did this, and and the health and fitness world, like, oh my god, MCT oil or desiccated liver pills, and people are like, this is amazing. I was like, like Vince Gironda was doing this 50 years ago.
There's nothing new.
Right.
We just it's almost like the story of America. We discovered a place that people already existed on. It's like, oh, we found this. Like, well, there's people right there.
I always was like, you make your own kind of future. And I still believe, obviously, especially in this country, you really are in so much control of your life. But I'm starting more and more to believe in the idea of fate because of what you were talking about. It's like, it just seems like no matter how right or wrong all these things go, you're going to end up in the vicinity of where you always were supposed to be.
Yeah, like if you're a man, your life is going to be probably best. And what I mean, a lot of people will have pretty disparate opinions on what it means to be best, obviously, but you are personally going to be most fulfilled if you're in a position where you're providing for and protecting something, whether it's your family or your community or whatever else, right? I mean, that's just the male instinct, is to do that. It's 2 million years of evolution, and then our primate ancestors before that just use aggression to protect the tribe, right?
There's a big denial too, not only with men and that instinct to protect, that instinct to provide, because I think a lot of like modern, I don't want to say modern women, but this modern kind of feminist movement overlooks that men have this drive to succeed professionally, not just because we want to have nice things and lots of money. It's the ability to fall asleep at night knowing you're providing for your family. That really is the majority of it. I mean, it sounds corny, but I'm telling you, that's the way it is. And I think there's either a denial of or a willing kind of ignorance to primal ways of life and things that generationally just are inside of us for men and women.
Well, we like to feel like we're progressing, right? I think that's a good thing. That's why anxiety exists. To like wake you up in the middle, like, hey, you need to do more with your life. That's a good thing, by the way. It's a biological urge to make sure that you're not settling for less than what you should have, or because when we all do better, right? That's how communities work.
I was thinking about just the idea of being a good citizen in preparation of being on this show, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Like the anxiety about whether or not you are a good citizen, whether or not you are a good father, a good husband, fill in the blank. That in and of itself is kind of the nucleus of being a good citizen, because I don't really, there is no right or wrong answer, right, with this stuff. But the guys I hang around, the ones that are very much not good fathers are not the guys who worry about being a good father.
Right.
All the guys that are like really hands-on and really that I admire for the way that they treat their children, they're always like, man, I just don't know if I'm doing enough. I don't know if I'm a good dad. And I was like, well, it's that anxiety, right? That keeps you going.
And when we have that conversation, it seems to be like, oh, isn't it ironic that the guy who's so worried is actually doing a good job? I was like, no, it's not ironic. That's the way it works. You know? I mean, you should be whether it's your children or your spouse, your friends and family, whoever it is, or your coworkers, especially if you're anywhere where you're a leader, I think is where it's most important. But you should be as keenly aware as possible about how the people around you are doing, right? That's kind of your job, is to manage that.
And you see it, like, I thought it was really beautiful in the Arnold documentary. I don't know if you saw it recently. How he said, I always gave off this vibe. I knew what I was doing and everything was going to be great. Yeah. But, I was scared, and you have that worry. And I've heard the greatest of all time you hear Meryl Streep talk about how sometimes she still is like ready to vomit on set because she doesn't know if she's going to be good enough. And
it's like imposter syndrome, right? But that's imposter syndrome. Like, you should to constantly improve, or even just to maintain whatever you're good at now. You have to have that lion chasing you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, you just need it. So that's the curse of modernity, I guess. We just don't have a natural predator anymore. It used to be,
it's hard.
The elements used to be our natural predator, and we had to come together as a society to fend off the elements, whatever they happen to be, even if it was a warring tribe from somewhere else. Now it's just not like that, right?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely, and just in all around, because everything is so comfortable. Like, everything's so comfortable, and I'm not complaining. I love my iPhone. I love my Roomba. Whatever it is. I certainly love, like, now that I'm a farmer, 5 times a week I will be doing something, and I go, how the fuck did my great grandpa do this?
Yeah, no shit.
Because I have a really nice, 20 horsepower mower that I can, and it's comfortable with like shocks, and it's still really hard to get it done in a day. I was like, how the hell do the Amish do this? It's just crazy.
And they're still doing it. Yeah, that's
still to this
crazy.
Day.
Yeah. Well, so I had one of our buddies is a farmer up in Minnesota, and he explained to me how they use their tractors, their tillevators, their tillers, their tillevators, all the stuff that they use, and their planters as well, all operate on GPS. So that tillevator goes out, tills the land, and then a second machine comes behind it and implants nitrogen in the ground in a specific spot. And then 8 months later, or whatever it is, the planter knows exactly where to put that plant, right?
It's so awesome.
It is awesome. But, like, how the fuck did anybody get anything done?
Well, they probably didn't. Your buddy probably has a 2,000 acre deal. You know what I'm saying? They didn't do it to that scale. That's how they did it,
Yeah, it's like I've seen. So I know the way my grandmother did it. She just put wooden stakes in the ground and then ran string and wherever the X was is where the plant was. So it's like, all right, okay, that's a not modern solution, but it
and
fucking
sometimes
works,
it works.
Yeah.
Kind of better, there's like I see it like the way that you lay cement right now is like the way you laid cement 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, it hasn't really improved.
That maybe obviously besides the truck dumping it, but the spades and stuff, it's like all the same stuff. It's pretty
that's
cool.
True. Yeah, we spend a lot. So I guess what does it mean to progress? And I've had this conversation with a lot of people recently. Like, it used to be. I can't speak for women so much, but for men especially, the trajectory was like, at some point during your teen years, you start working for your dad probably, right? Or at least working with him in some capacity. And then you set out on your own to find a career, find a spouse, have some kids. And then a big part of your life, if not the primary focus of your life, was trying to provide better opportunities for your kids than you had, or give them a quote unquote better life, whatever that means. Now, I don't know how we do that. I don't know how I can give my kids, if I were to have a better life than I've had. Like, it's been rough in points, but it wasn't. It was pretty easy for me to become educated. Easy because I have determination and shit, but it wasn't like back in the day. I mean, it's like I can't. I have a 4,000 square foot house.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. How am I supposed to what am I going to do? And I have 4 college degrees. How am I going to make a better life for my kids? So I don't. You're an actual parent. How do you think about that? Because you've had a pretty comfortable life before you had kids.
I did. Yes.
So how do you even all right, so we had a little malfunction, but we're back. So you, by the time you had kids, you were pretty comfortable in life, right?
Was. Way more than I ever thought I would be.
Right, exactly. But your parents probably went through fucking some crazy shit to make sure that you had opportunities. That used to be the standard. I mean, not that people aren't doing it now. It's just I think it's a little bit more confusing now exactly what you need to do, right? So
How
was that for you?
That's a very good point. And I was thinking about that the other day, is that it's really kind of, for like a guy in his teens or early 20s, like building his life. Giorgio right here, like a young man, and he's really looking at the world. It's like, how can I make my stamp, And it's beautiful that the possibilities are endless in 2023. But it's got to be also a little overwhelming. Like floating in space. Floating in space is liberating for the first hour, but then you realize, like, oh my God, there's no point of reference here. I'm just in the abyss. Whereas, like, our fathers really was like, go get a job after I graduate, go in the military, or go to college, and get a job. Go to college to study something that can get me a job, right? And that was it. And take a pick and go and grind.
Find a way to serve and be a provider. That was just the easy part, right?
And so that is an interesting question to pose, especially now. And the way I thought about it was, I have a friend who's the son of massive A-list celebrity actors. Okay, both parents are massive, recognizable A-listers. Okay, and so the amount of wealth and the lifestyle he was afforded was quite great. And he would talk about how being a kid on private jets and being a kid going to the south of France and everything. And he said, I would trade it all for just unmitigated attention and bonding. And I thought about that. Is, I may not be able to provide a bigger house for my daughter. I may not be able to provide the complete safety of no financial burden for college. But what I can try and provide to make that better life for her is like a real unwavering commitment to trying to find out who she is as a person and not impose my ways, while also providing safety and discipline and the parameters to let her grow and really build that relationship. I think that's one way that you can kind of forego this whole confusion of like the modern world and the professional landscape.
I mean, the reality is that we have to, as we mentioned before, we have to get to the same place we always have to get to. Now it's just like, instead of battling, it's become easier to find a career for the most part. It's been, as a matter of fact, it's probably easier now to become wealthy than it was at any point in human history. But just because of the mechanics of society that allow for those things, being present with your kids and your spouse is now something that you have to struggle towards, instead of that was just the standard and then you had to struggle to go out in the world and make stuff and bring it back. But now it's more like you're struggling to come back. And that's how all of human civilization always works, right? It's always cyclical, right? That to some degree. And
it's really, both men and women are in a weird position, because I think the standards for dads, which is a great thing, are much higher now than ever before. I mean,
if you just deliver a kid that isn't a serial killer and survives to 18 back in the day, you did a good job. Right?
People would go like, well, what does your husband do for a living? Right? And you go, he's a fill in the blank. Okay, he provides every day, and he comes home from work, and you have food on the table. Yep. Okay, he's done his job. No one asked. Like I went to one of my daughter's first day of school. It was kindergarten. Her first day of school in kindergarten, and I had to take because my wife was out of state filming, and I was solo, and I noticed that there was like 35-40% of the dads were there.
Interesting.
And I was thinking about, like, I'm old, but I'm not ancient. In 1987, no dads came to your mom brought you, and that no one asked questions.
Right.
And so I think that the elevation of what is expected of a dad is great. But it also then, again, it gets us back to like, well, it's kind of confusing, because I kind of remember my grandpa saying, just work hard and be an honest man and everything will work out. But now I'm being told, like, oh, you also have to you must be that positive male role model for your children too. It's like,
Well, I mean, do you think it's to some degree because of all the noise in society now? Like back in the day, to become famous, you actually had to be great at something. Or, I mean, sometimes it was luck, but you had to be like an athlete or really smart or really talented or really care something. There had to be something, right? And then we as a society were pretty selective about the people we allowed to become famous as well. Because if you were an absolute cunt that nobody liked, maybe you get famous, maybe you don't, but you don't have a glowing image. Like the people these days in Hollywood think that because they're in Hollywood, it somehow justifies them having some opinion of some sort, right? Which is, or not having an opinion. Anybody can have one, but it means that other people should listen to them because
they feel obligated, to tell people, hey, how things should be going.
But it's based on that old thinking that this was. It's almost like to become famous is almost like a graduate degree or something. Like you worked hard to get there, or you were special, something special. Now it's just like social media, right? So there's a dilution rather of the talent pool that we look at on a regular basis, right? So it's not the cream of the crop anymore for the most part. It's a pretty wide. So I think a lot of our institutions have failed or are beginning to fail because of that. And I think that one of the institutions that is failing because of that is just masculinity and how we as a society view it and its purpose, right? Because there are all these competing ideas about what it is and how it should. Well, some people don't think it's useful at all, which is that's an interesting fucking thought.
Well, they'll think that until there's another calamity,
predator,
like there's another real reason. I was living I wasn't in New York City, but I was living in northern Jersey when 9/11 happened, and I will tell you, obviously, I would never. If I could go back in time, I would do what I could to prevent it. But I will tell you, like, November, December 2001 was fucking magic.
Yeah.
It was magic. People randomly hugging you and people walking by, cops shaking hands, high five, put on thank. Firemen, the same thing. We appreciate what you're doing. You saw someone in uniform. Don't even get me started. People were like, everyone was like, you go, U.S. military. And there was this real sense of camaraderie. So I certainly am not trying to encourage that there would be something like that. But I will tell you that all these people who are saying like traditional masculine traits, there's no place for them in this world. Like, well, you'll find out real quick when it's too late that there is definitely a place for it.
Yeah, and I think that's back to your point about parenthood. I think that is everybody used to know what a man was and what his job was, right? And and kids would learn that from how their parents interacted and how not just that, but how the media they consume, whatever it happened to be, whether it was school books, cartoons, now YouTube and shit like that. Now it's not so obvious.
No,
you know what I mean? It's not so obvious to. I say this all the time. Young men or young boys and young women learn everything they need to know about how women should be treated by men by how their father treats their mother, right? And if he's not there, that's what they think is right. It doesn't occur to a young mind that what's happening is circumstantial or wrong. That's just how it is, right? And that's how your body and brain chemistry develop to support that worldview over time. And now it's like I feel like, and you can tell more about this than I can, but I can see it in the guys I talk to, being a parent these days, being a male, being a dad these days, you're like constantly struggling against those forces.
You are. And the forces and the impressions that are made on your kids, I think, are a lot less obvious, as you pointed out. But sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because I was born in 1979. So when I started to recognize things that were important, how to treat women, develop my own kind of taste in art, what global politics really meant. And it was the 90s. In the 80s, I was still a kid. It was like, I like Star Wars and baseball. So in the 90s, I thought, because of the fact that my dad was a really ambitious and hardworking guy. He worked his fingers to the bone, traveled a lot, worked crazy hours. And then I would couple that with watching like Homer Simpson, Al Bundy, the traditional kind of trope of sitcom dad was, okay, dad works, he hates his job, he's miserable and comes home. It's a sexless relationship with the wife, and they don't ever show any outward kind of care for each other. Right. He's doing his job, and the wife constantly complains about how crappy he is, you know, and
they only show care when it is part of a like redemption story arc in that episode, right? Like, oh, I fucked up, and now, but I actually do really love you, and here's how.
And my dad was, to his credit, was like, again, like a really good idol for me to look up to when it came to ambition and working hard and if committing to something and standing behind it and accountability. And he also was like, my dad was never like a strip club late night with the boys guy. But he also, they like never showed outward affection to each other. I don't know if my parents ever said, I love you. I don't know if they ever held hands or hugged and stuff like that. So that's the stuff where it's like, you can learn from the past in the positive ways, but also in the negative ways, you better step your game up. And it gets back to like providing a better life for my children than I was provided. It's like, I want to emulate my father in many ways when it came to, he was so trustworthy. He was so accountable. He was so responsible, and he was so charitable, and all of these things. But I also want to like give my wife a big smooch right in front of my daughter so she sees that, and hold her hands when we walk and stuff like that. You know?
Well, that's so. You know, we're kind of answering the question, I guess. How do you give the kid a better life? You know, than you had. It isn't just about money. Obviously, and it's not about things. In a lot of ways, it's not even about experiences, because money can buy experiences as well. As a matter of fact, that might be the most important thing money can buy is experiences.
I think it absolutely is not about money unless it's really extreme. It's not about money unless you're really poor.
Or really rich.
Really rich. Where you're sci-fi rich, where now you're like, what can I do to make my kid not weird? Rich. Or if you're, below a certain level where it's like, no, it really is about money, because I don't know how my kid's going to eat consistently, you know?
Yeah. And those that dynamic that's changed between parents and kids is also changed between men and women. And it's gotten weird over the past 10 years or so. More so over the past 5 with all these involuntarily celibate dudes who think like they have some weird ideas. It's almost like social and political nihilism. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I'm not gonna obey my programming, and I'm not gonna participate in this stuff because I don't think it's fair or whatever. It's like, well, life ain't fair, bud. But
almost uniformly.
But if you're gonna deny your programming, then good fucking luck. You know what I mean? I mean, use your toaster as a television and see what happens. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But it has been difficult for us, I think, to track the way that the dynamic between men and women has changed over the past, let's call it 70 years, since men came back from the war and then women were in the workplace, and then it's kind of continued up through the 70s. Jordan Peterson talks about this sometimes. I don't think he really goes into it deeply enough, to be honest, but that men and women don't necessarily know how to work with each other in the workplace yet. I don't think people have figured out that dynamic necessarily, because it wasn't always like that. But I think, forget about that. I don't think that in dating and courtship, that men and women have found an equilibrium either, because it used to be that I'm a man, I'm going to demonstrate my value to provide for and protect this woman, right? And that's it. And then, the woman selects. That's usually how it's gone throughout primate history. But now it's like, especially over the past 12 or 15 years, women are graduating college more. They're getting higher paying jobs than most blue collar men now. So, but they still do like blue collar men. You know what I mean? They like
a lot of young liberal college girls will deny that, but
it's
when
true.
Push comes to shove,
they like calloused hands. That's just and it's again, you can't deny your programming, but when one of your primary evolutionary values is as a provider, and the woman provides more than you, I think that has thrown a wrench into the fucking dynamic between men and women.
I mean, I dealt with it. So when we first got married, my wife was on a network sitcom, making like, are you kidding me money? You know, and I certainly was successful by any metric. But there was a weirdness that came with it, and then I had to look at it really through the prism of the callous hands, like you pointed out, right? And I was like, okay, way more men than ever before in this country are dealing with what I'm dealing with right now.
Right.
Way more. And so let's like take a step back and look at that. Okay, maybe my wife makes more money. Maybe there's lots of women making more money than me, and so be it. Does that take away, in and of itself, does that take away from my like masculine energy of provider and protector? And the way I looked at it was like, okay, there's way more women than ever doing 60% of these jobs, right? But us three, after this show, let's go get a bite to eat and then drive west and go to an oil rig. Okay?
Yeah.
It's 100% men.
It's all men, yeah.
And then
Sure, yeah.
if a fuse blows again and we call an electrician, 98%, 0.9% chance it's a guy. And the person that is, out fishing for lobster, we can go down the list where there are these places where women are perfectly fine going like, yeah, this is totally a male-dominated world, and go do it. And I can try to sublimate that in my marriage, and that happens. There's these little bursts, and I've been lucky in that there's these ebb and flows where like then I'll be making more money than she'll, because the actors they're not always working.
Yeah.
But then there's like moments too where my wife and I have a very kind of like, I don't try to impose like really strong rules most of the time, nor does she. But there's moments where I draw a line, and there's a switch, and I go like, I will literally say, stop talking. I need you to go in the other room right now. Blah, blah, blah. One that just off the top of my head was like during the fallout from the George Floyd stuff. A lot of
You guys were still in LA at the time.
I was in
right?
Venice Beach, and the riots were in Santa Monica, moving. I'm watching them on TV move towards Venice, right?
Yeah.
And they're burning down. They're trying to burn Santa Monica Police Department and everything. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, this is a genuinely dangerous mob, right? So I go to the garage and I get my 2 guns that I own, and I load them. I keep the magazines away, but I load them and I prepare them, and I'm putting them next to the door. And my wife's like, but what? I was like, stop talking. Go in the bedroom with Magnolia. That's my daughter. Go in there now. And you guys just stay safe. Everything will be fine. I'm going to stay and survey from the front window. That's it. Like, there's no, and my wife was, yes, totally. And like, so I get these bursts of where it's like, this is my time. And there's absolutely bursts when it comes to child rearing or making decisions for like the benefit of the family when it comes to like social relationships, where my wife is like, I hear you, your opinion is worthy, but this is my time, and I know I just take the back seat to it,
Yeah, it's there's an old saying I was in the 82nd Airborne in the infantry, and there's an old saying we have about infantry. There's only 2 posture statuses. There are only 2 positions for infantry. You're either attacking or you're preparing to attack, right? So, when you find yourself in modernity, I've got a fucking cubicle job, or I don't get my hands dirty that much anymore. You got to go find that somewhere, right? And I think when you map that onto what you're talking about with the relationship, it might not be the case that you're the sole breadwinner or even the highest breadwinner, but the idea of being a provider and protector doesn't just disappear with that, right? That's still something that the woman craves, and it's still something that we crave to provide, right? That's how we feel purpose. So look, you don't need to be the Terminator. You don't need to be out there preparing for World War III all the time, although I would recommend it.
Yeah.
Because it'll make you feel better.
It does. I think there's something primal about, I see it because I never served. It's a big problem for me, like a big bone of contention. And when I look at my past, and people oftentimes want to talk to drug addicts and alcoholics about like, the mistakes that they made, or like the regrets. And I was really lucky that I was never like a violent guy. I was never the guy who like got high and then woke up to be like, I said what? I was always like, I pulled my dick out, or And I also towards the end I isolated, so I was safe from that. But big regret was like when I was graduating high school, I could barely tie my shoes, let alone fly to Afghanistan and be accountable, you know? And I look back on that as a grown man now. I look back and I was like, I feel so bad because I could have been a good soldier. I'm not saying I'm the bravest guy who would have been out there, war hero, but I love America. I believe in the cause. I was always really comfortable with the idea of chain of command. My father and my grandfather were both very well decorated military members. Pardon me. But, you know, it's like I can cry over spilt milk, or I can just find the ways now to sublimate that, to scratch that itch. And there are plenty.
Yeah, there are. I mean, people ask me a lot these days if, like, they're young, 17, 18, 19-year-old men, they want to serve their community somehow. They're like, well, should I go be a cop somewhere, or should I join the military? I'm like, I wouldn't, to be honest. Maybe what I tell people is that you should go be a sheriff's deputy in a small town somewhere. That's like, it's an elected position. There's actual accountability, and sheriffs are kind of the last line of defense against government tyranny from the institutional level. So I'm into that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's like the follow up to that. I think too many people are satisfied with the no, and it's like, it's almost like the inverse of improv, like you yes and, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to build on this, and no is not the end. Like when you're, especially when you were trying to be a servant of some sort, whether it's to your family or to society, you have an idea, or in business, right? I mean, if you took the first no and went home, then you're a fucking loser, right? And it's the same in life. Like, if you're thinking about joining the military now, look, go ahead and do it if you really feel strongly about it. I personally wouldn't, but don't let the fact that the institutions are fucked up right now stop you from finding a way to serve, I guess is what I'm saying. Because there are plenty of other alternatives out there, right? You don't necessarily even need to be in an official capacity to help people.
And there's so many, you're right, there's so many ways to help. And one thing, I am not like particularly, I'm certainly not like a woke guy, and I certainly have problems with it, like the whole kind of woke movement, right? But I'm not vocal or that bothered about it. I'm not like hiding my true feelings. My day goes on. Someone's like, you know, they're looking to initiate another vaccine passport or whatever, or there's some feminist blah 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 or trans blah blah blah. I go, it seems silly, but I was like, what? But wait, doesn't Magnolia need lunch? You know, everything kind of just one ear out the other. But one thing that really gets on my nerves is that, along with this pro-feminist thing, which is at its core, the intention, I think, is amazing, because I have only one child and she's a female. I want what's best for women.
Yes. And
I want equality, and I want that. And I kind of get bugged by the idea of glass ceilings. But in that, there's been a willful kind of like a foot on the neck of just men in general. And not only with like male culture, but the other day I was looking at this woman online, I forget her name, but she was like a journalist or a activist, you know, and she was talking about how all the men online that boys look up to, she was trashing. And it was like Andrew Tate, you know, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan. And she's going out, and then I thought to myself, I was like, well, then who should they listen to?
Yeah.
If every voice that seems to catch on with young men nowadays, who are more confused than ever, if they're bad, like where show me this panacea, this male voice that is supposedly in your eyes positive, because you just do nothing but shoot down all these guys that seemingly are really connecting with young men. You know, and Andrew Tate is a perfect example. He gets shit on. And I don't think, the one problem I have with Andrew Tate is that, and I don't think it's his fault necessarily, but what a 14-year-old guy watching this, right? And he's playing video games. He has no connection with females, and he wants it. And he wants to be a tough guy, and he wants to make money, and he wants to be cool with chicks. He sees Andrew Tate, and I think a lot of times, because you're young and you're dumb, you think, well, the Bugatti itself, the private jet itself, and the yacht, that's what and I was like, no, it's not about the money. It's about the fact that the guy makes promises to himself and he keeps every one. And he wakes up the next day and he does the same. And a lot of times when you see like the unedited interviews with Andrew Tate and he talks about women, you're like, well, that guy's actually like, he's a really considerate gentleman, you know? So I just, it bugs me that everything just in the whole manosphere gets shot down. I go, well, then what does the 14-year-old boy do? Because like you said, right now it's never been worse. You're so confused. You're like, well, it's not cool for me to be a jock anymore. So is it cool? Am I supposed to even be a guy? Am I like, seriously, is it bad? Should I become trans, you know?
Yeah. I think it is, I guess, a result of third wave feminism and the Marxist shit that's crept into Western society. But men are the most responsible for the trouble we're in right now because they capitulated to this nonsense, right? And yeah, there's society bears some responsibility for it. Like when you tear down good men, young men will turn to bad men for answers. Right? It's
true.
That's how people get captured by shitty ideologies. Like, oh, they're all out to attack us constantly, so we have to form this group now, and it's, you know, it's an aggressive group because we feel like we need to be aggressive. I mean, that's how despotism happens. You know what I mean? Because enough people think they've been aggrieved by some group or another, and some charismatic speaker can convince them that our entire goal in life just should be to annihilate that thing.
Right.
Like the Jews, for example. Right? I mean, it's happened in our parents' lifetime or our grandparents' lifetime where somebody has mobilized an entire goddamn country against a race of people. It's happening right now in South Africa, right? Yeah. It's like, this is the danger. Forget about the current state that we're in. Is primarily isolated young men, sexless, isolated young men who feel completely divorced from society. Stage 2 of that is they are mobilized by some leader or another or some bad idea or another, and they start doing violent shit en masse, right? That's the next step that happens. And we're so goddamn myopic about this. We think it's like, oh, well, fucking men have been in charge for long enough. So fuck these guys. These kids are just gonna have to figure it out. Are you fucking kidding me? That's your solution? Is just to leave a nuclear fucking weapon lying out on the lawn?
Yeah,
with no safety mechanism on it. That's what you're doing.
You know, it's like the Middle East, right? It's like, and it's certainly not the actual boots on the ground, the brave men and women that actually go over. But you know, if you look at like the West or NATO in general, like how they have over a 30, 40-year span have treated major countries in the Middle East. Like, do you know how easy it is to point out the West is like an evil lord, an evil force to a 5-year-old kid in Afghanistan?
I'm telling you, they don't even. It's not about Islam for them. It's not. I promise you. I've had several confrontations, some less pleasant than others with these people, and the vast majority of them aren't true believers. They're not sitting around praying 5 times a day and thinking about how they're going to spread Islam to the world. No, they're fucking pissed off. Right. Because we came and fucked with their area. You know, we blew up their fucking school or some shit like that.
Or like, you look at like Afghanistan, you're like, well, like they were our, you know, like, can you imagine if you're a 60-year-old Afghani guy and you're like, I remember shooting, you know, shoulder launched rockets Stingers, at Soviet helicopters, and you guys going, you're amazing. And then you bounced. And now 20, 30 years later, I see NATO planes, you know, killing my family. My point being is like, what's left over? This vacuum where it's like, we just don't like it. It's dangerous. So let's just destroy it and then not try to put anything up as like this positive alternative. There's just anger. There's confusion. And young men, it's really tough. And another thing is like, it's not necessarily all society's fault too, because there's also stuff like Tinder. Tinder has destroyed the way any young man who's going to look at women and what and I'm not trying to like be some Pollyannish guy. Like, I'm a dog. When I was single, I was a horrible dog, a man slut. Yeah. And I'm not saying don't be. What I am saying is like this interaction between like, I'll just swipe and put it out there to 1,000 chicks. A couple, 20 are going to come through, right? And you have this room service. Like, that's not how you court women. That's not how you deal with the opposite sex. It's really.
Just the ability to communicate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like all this stuff is layered on top of each other. Almost everything, almost every skill that we develop as human beings, well, particularly as men, let's just stay with men. Every skill we develop as men, regardless of where it is kind of designed on getting pussy, right? And so, to some degree,
Absolutely.
We put spoilers on our fucking Hondas. We work out and all this stuff. Like, men don't care about most of that stuff, or they didn't used to. But now we're getting to the point where men are appreciating other men more, I guess. But back in the day, it wasn't ever about, as you said, it wasn't about the Bugatti.
Right.
It was about if I drive slowly through downtown Miami in this car, there are going to be really hot women that want to have sex with me.
All right? Like every decision I've ever made before I became a parent, before I was like genuinely deeply in love with my wife, like every decision I made was like, well, what would make this look good for girls? That it's true, and I don't mean that. I know it sounds like so boneheaded to like a 20-year-old girl who's out there and probably like some liberal arts, student. But what I mean by that is not that I'm just constantly like an ape looking to mate, but impressing the opposite sex really made me be introspective and want to develop myself as a human.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't want to. Well, I don't know. There's some people who will fake it, but it doesn't last long. You know what I mean? People are pretty good bullshit detectors.
More so than any, and I think that's the one saving grace of modern children. I don't want to say that sounds denigrate. Modern youth, because all the way up into like people in their 20s, they're so much better at sniffing out BS and finding authenticity than we ever were, because they've had the internet their whole life.
Yeah, and
they see like it's really quite amazing how, like, take David Letterman, right? David Letterman, this is how important authenticity is. David Letterman had sex with his intern who was like 40 years younger than him while he was married, and went on TV that night and he was like, yeah, that's unfortunate. I hope we can move on from that. So anyway, we got George Clooney on the show, and no one ever said it, because everyone's like, well, Dave Letterman's always been a dick. He admits it. He's like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to be friends with anybody. And Ellen DeGeneres' career's over because she's not a nice person.
Right.
Because she sold it as like, I'm your best friend.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, perception matters, I guess, right? But that's all of society's based on that. Fashion trends, whatever. I mean, but I think over the past 100 years or so, it's gotten way more complicated because of the pervasiveness of media and then the profit motive behind this stuff, like just the concentrated profit motive. So all the shit talked about fashion magazines from the 60s through the 90s, I guess, about creating false images for women and shit like that. That was women that did that. It wasn't men running those magazines. Yep. It was women and gay dudes. It's like you're presenting the perfect image in all of your marketing materials, right? And then you show up to the store to buy it, and it doesn't look like it's like the McDonald's commercial on TV. The burger never looks like that in real life, right? And look, no offense, I don't think men never expected you to look perfect before. You know what I mean?
Or thin.
Or thin, yeah.
Right,
think about wearing lingerie. You put lingerie on and walk into the bedroom, like, take that shit off right now. We're fucking.
I'd rather you be naked.
I don't give a fuck about that
I'd rather you
shit.
be naked.
That's for you, dude. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
But it's like, when it became commercialized, now it's an industry, right? So the media advertises on the news, so the news has to talk about how this is the right thing to do, right?
It's hard, man. Like, when you talk about the media, it's such a messy game, and I don't like to do.
I mean, you've been in it for a while.
I have, and I don't like to do things in life, certainly professionally, and then go and talk crap about it, because I met I've really weird experiences when it comes to traditional media. I've worked for Access Hollywood. I've been on CNN I got paychecks from CNN. I got paycheck, and I've done some rather out there kind of like right wing stuff too. I never looked at it as my real comfort zone, my real, like, this is where I feel in my play in my zone, why I feel worth it in a professional landscape, is having professional conversations. So I was never going to be like, I'm not talking to Ben Shapiro, or I'm not talking to Rachel Maddow. I was like, well, interesting. You're a smart fella. You're a smart lady. Let's go. You know. But the media itself, it's so strange, and I don't know how much it is like this in 2023. But I will tell you one experience I had that was so telling in like early 2016. Things are at a real height because now we're in the kind of the back end of like the Caitlyn Jenner trans movement. There's a lot of the police brutality stuff that's cooking up, and then of course Donald announces he's running for president. And there was a video of this man in the Bay Area. I'm pretty sure, I think it was Oakland, but
it was. You're talking about the young Marine that got hit in the head with a 203 round, like a smoke grenade.
No, this guy was walking through the streets with a machete. He was shirtless, walking through, and you know, clearly
this is 2016.
I
remember that. I lived in Oakland at the time. Yeah.
And the cops rightfully came. And then when they saw that this man was not putting down said machete, they attacked him and you know, like isolated the limb with the machete, and they kind of beat him a little bit. Not too bad, but and then they arrested him.
Yeah.
And there was a activist on this panel that I was doing, a panel show, and she was like, "This is another clear example of white supremacy," and you know, because the man was black, but also some of the cops were black. I mean, it was Oakland. I think it's
most of them probably.
So
were black,
I was like, and also I was like, this is a danger to society. His skin was irrelevant, and I think the cops are actually pretty tame with it. I think it's crazy for you to claim that this is white supremacy. And she starts yelling at me. What do you know about the black? So I started yelling at her, and I start like really yelling, and like veins are coming out of my neck, and I kind of lost my judgment. I mean, I was like on live TV screaming at this woman. And so that happens, and it seems like it's 10 minutes. It was probably 45 seconds. And we go to commercial break, and I put my hand in my head, and I unclipped my microphone. I was like, well, that's it. I'm fired. You know, I'm screwed. And I walk over on stage, and I was like, I'm sorry. I disagree with you, but I should never have yelled at you like that. I apologize. And she's like, you're right. And she says, I walk off the stage, and I get into the hallway, and there are the executive producer and the head of programming of the West Coast at CNN standing there chatting. And I'm like, all right, let's just dive in, you know?
Yeah.
And I walk towards them, and I'm expecting them to read me the riot act. And they both turn and look at me with ear-to-ear Joker grins, and they're like, yeah, that's television, baby, yeah. And I'm like, this isn't Jerry Springer, guys. You know, this is a news channel, you know? And I knew right then and there. I was like, oh, this is where we're headed, you know?
Yeah, Jon Stewart warned about it with Crossfire back in the day.
I bet, yeah.
He's like, I don't know that we need to be setting the standard that our political discourse is across the table screaming at one another. That seems like a bad idea, right? I've always used this metaphor. It's like you begin a conversation, you know, quietly, where you can only hear it up close, and you move farther away and you have to get louder, and then the farther you get away from each other, the louder you have to be until you can't really reach each other anymore without bullets or bombs. Right. You know what I mean? That's kind of how it works. So it's like, why are we... That's the profit motive in the media that bothers me. You know what I mean? I mean, I understand it. It's a business. You got your job, I guess, is to make your business the best that it can be. But if it's at the expense of society, I don't know that I believe that.
Yes, but also you're right. It is at the expense of society. It's affecting us greatly. But I also think it's not media companies' fault.
No, it's our fault. Yeah.
I don't watch the news, but it's still my fault just as much as it is any. In the same way, like, I'll never forget 12 years ago or something, every person I met in the entertainment industry was like, fucking Kardashians. How come they're getting all this attention? You had 10 million last night. They got 10 million viewers on me. And I go, why are you blaming them?
Yeah.
Like, someone had the genius idea to put a camera on them. They're just collecting paychecks.
Yeah.
Like, I've never seen 1 second of that show. So it's your fault. And then like, if it's not catching on with the public, then there's no one else to blame than the media outlet that is doing it. But if it is, can you really, you know what I'm saying? Like, can you really blame them?
Well, I mean, so I'm glad you brought that up, because back to the point of people being famous and feeling like that gives them not just the right, but I think you mentioned they almost feel responsible to give their opinion all the time about things. But again, it's associated with this. The old standard for fame used to be that you were accomplished in some way, talented and or accomplished. And because of that, you were a leader in your community, right? And now we have a different pathway to fame that doesn't weed out any of the nonsense, but it has the same impetus to try to tell everybody, not just from the pulpit, look down on people and tell them what to do, but to actively try to change culture, which is way more problematic.
And I
forget about John Wayne was a draft dodger, right? Total draft dodger. He's a piece of shit in real life.
Same with Ted Nugent, and they can talk all the rah tough guy stuff. It's like, well, when it counted,
but back then nobody knew with John Wayne, right? So and the way he played it publicly was a benefit to this country. I think he sustained manliness and increased patriotism in this country.
So let me ask you a question, as a man who served proudly. To me, even though the public narrative was way different, I actually have a lot more respect for a guy like Muhammad Ali, who publicly did exactly what he wanted to do, even what he was doing in his private life.
So this the idea what the civil rights movement in the United States called passive resistance, right, is based on an old Buddhist principle. It's not actually passive resistance. It's not what it means. It's a principle called satyagraha, and what it means is that I'm going to do the right thing and accept whatever the consequences are, right? That's what it actually means. Doesn't mean you're not going to fight back necessarily, but sometimes it does. Like I'm not going to tear this system down and fuck everybody over because of how I feel, but this is how I feel, and that's how I'm going to live. That's kind of what it is. So I respect that way more than especially more than people who are trading on the honor of better men, frankly. Right. You know what I mean? Like dudes that didn't have the fucking balls to do it that are going to tell everybody else. And it's become a thing too now with in the GWAT time period where there's a lot of people. Things got pretty effeminate for a while, right? In the 90s, it was all hippie, grunge bullshit. And then early 2000s started with skinny jeans. Once a bunch of GWAT veterans started graduating from the military back into society and becoming, getting into film and television, authors, just podcast influencers and stuff like that. There's a brand, like there's a look now. It's like Cool Hand Luke back in the day, or Rebel Without a Cause. There's a look that kind of defines what the modern man is. And there's a lot of people out there fucking faking it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is
it's
good and bad,
just like
right?
The kid,
like
right?
I want it to be like that, because I want people to be more like Tim Kennedy than they are like some dude wearing skinny jeans, right? And if that's what it takes for you to mimic his behavior because you want to be him, then I think that's a net positive for society.
I do. I totally agree. But it's kind of like the 14-year-old we were talking about who sees Andrew Tate and thinks it's all about the Bugatti and not about the person. Yeah. But I know plenty of dudes who wear the tactical pants and
an aggressive beard. I think
the full beard and then a black rifle shirt. Okay. But I was like, oh, she in military guy? No. But I got concealed carry, so you know how to. And I was like, yeah, man, tits too. You train at all? No. But yes, I could believe me. I've been my fair share of bar. And I was like, oh, you're LARPing. You know, like you're, and like you said, like if that's what makes them live a better life, maybe than the guy wearing skinny or what's trendy.
Sure, but we're not all the way there, right?
But it's
the LARPing is the first part. You want the kid or even the adult. It doesn't matter. Inspire anybody you can. You want them to take that first step.
Yeah.
And enjoy the positive benefits of it. But then you have to take that next step and be like, all right, here's the work that needs to get done. You don't have to have served in the military to go train.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Most of the dudes I know rolling and out there shooting aren't former military. They're just dudes that are worried about how society's going these days. You know what I mean? I'm the least confrontational person. I'm like, I cried the other day when I found out Pee Wee Herman died. I mean, if Tim Kennedy's here, I'm the other end of the spectrum, you know, like, but for me, it was always like, I can't trust that the world is like that. Right.
And there may be a time and a place, and it certainly was in Venice. I'd be walking my dogs with my daughter, and like there's some toothless dude who's just like throwing bottles at us, you know. And I just was like, I'll never be Gordon Ryan. I'll never be George St. Pierre. But I at least wanted the ability to protect and to be able to be capable if some shit came my way that I was not going to be able to avoid, you know?
That's something that I'm kind of keenly focused on right now. I'm not sure how to do it, but something that I think needs being done is to make being a manly dad cool again, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what the steps are for that.
Dude, it is. In my opinion, and maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but at least from the people I hang with and I talk with, and that goes not only with like Central Texas Tim Kennedy guy friends that I train jiu-jitsu with, that's Hollywood dudes, like actors and writers and stuff. I think when there's no microphone or camera in front of people, almost all men agree. It's like, yeah, I saw a picture of you the other. I mean, I can't tell you how many like really extreme Hollywood people, especially on Twitter, they're constantly still talking about Trump and Russia in 2023, and then they'll call me, and they're like, I saw you say you get your purple belt the other day, and you're 3 years older than me, and like you have a six pack. Like what can I do? Can you help me? And I'm like, okay, yes, yes. I'm not the paragon of manliness, but I will tell you, I see there's a germ there because you mentioned the 90s about this anti-culture.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how not cool it was to be buff or lift weights in 1996.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're Dorian Yates, but
just watch any 80s or 90s movie, teen movie. The buff dude is always the villain. Always.
80s dude. It was, listen.
This is the Revenge of the Nerds.
The jock was always the villain, but he was still sweet.
Yeah, that's
like
true,
Johnny and Karate Kid was fucking
true,
sweet, and James Spader and Pretty in Pink.
Yeah.
The 90s,
he got dumb.
Literally, the cool guy was like the Seth Green character, and I literally lifted weights in secrecy when I was in high school, and you didn't wear. I was varsity athlete in 3 sports. I never would wear my Letterman jacket to school. That's crazy.
I've
talk.
never seen a human being do
talk.
that.
Yeah,
that would be upsetting to see that. To be honest, I would be like, that's gay, dude. You got to get out of here with that shit.
And, but I think with my sister, I have one sibling. She's 11 years older than me, and she went to the same high school. When I was a little boy and I saw her friends in high school, in 1987, it was pretty sweet to be like captain of the football team or be prom queen. It was sweet. In 1997, it was super not sweet.
Yeah, it's weird how that works, isn't it?
It is, and there's like those cultural changes, and I'm not saying that's all bad. Certainly not all bad, but what I think the important thing that they miss, because you look that idea of like, screw you, culture is against me, society's against me, so F everything. Well, if you can compartmentalize that, there's a lot of power, because I like fighting back and standing up for what you genuinely believe in is really the most manly thing you can do.
Regardless of what social or political position you're coming from, there's something wrong that needs to be fixed in society for you, right?
It's usually
the same stuff, right? Not precisely the same thing, but I try to tell people this all the time. The difference is you have an opinion with other normal people who on the other end of the political spectrum than yourself are very similar. It's the government or somebody else intruding into your business mostly. For everybody, right?
Or a media company profiting off your guys fighting.
Yeah. Like abortion rights and gun rights. Those are 2 groups of people that want to be left the fuck alone. They just want to be left alone.
There's no win in that. Yeah.
No. It's just like leave people alone, and it's like, okay, cool. You may disagree fundamentally on some of that stuff, but you don't have the right to tell other people what to do for the most part, right? That's something that you believe. If you're a liberty-minded person, you believe that to your core,
right?
Unless it's a couple of things that you disagree with, and I got to tell you, that makes for a very complicated discussion. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to work that out between people who don't think that the government should have any control over anybody, and people who, are religious, for example, who think that certain things are unethical. I mean, give to Caesar what is Caesar's is what I remember reading. Not necessarily pass a law to stop people from doing what they want to do, but it's like that the mindset is very clearly the same. it is that people have these instincts, right, to be independent, to fight against authority. I don't know why that's so present evolutionarily for human beings, more so than other species, to fight against authority. But it is. It's also, as you mentioned, no matter what happens to society and culture or the way men think, it always comes back to that. It always comes back to that primal instinct in some way, right? It's like, fucking Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are going to fight.
Right.
Because the two richest motherfuckers in the world are close, right? Two of the richest people on earth are like, their instinct is to fight each other to demonstrate their value to the world. Not all the accomplishments. Fuck all that. We're just gonna fight. You know what I mean?
It really we got to base animal level. That's such a beautiful example, because there was just one straw too far. Yeah. Where both of them are like, no,
fuck you.
No, listen, I know it sounds great. I'm gonna fight this guy, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. One of the most meaningful moments in my life came from that, and it was me getting my ass kicked. And it wasn't, and believe me, like I said, I'm a loudmouth, and I love having conversations. Is my fun place. But it wasn't anything like that where I was spracking off somebody who beat me up. I was living in the Bay Area at the time, and I had one friend I was not the coolest guy at that time. I really just, all my life revolved around was getting high and getting drunk. I had this dude who's my buddy, and he lived in this apartment down below me, and I would always just go in and we'd play PlayStation. We'd play Jet Moto on the original PlayStation, and we'd rip beers and bongs. And I know he had a roommate, but the guy was mostly gone. And his roommate was this black dude from Oakland. His name was Corey. And he wasn't big like Jack, but he was really tall, like 6'5", and skinny as a beanpole. But he was legit, like from Oakland. Like, he didn't mess around. And normally during the day, I would go in and I would just walk in their door without knocking, and my friend would be there, and we'd do our thing. And at this time, I just busted in. I was like, "What's up, motherfuckers?" And he was on the couch. Corey was on the couch with a chick. They weren't like naked, but they were kissing, making out. And he's like, "Are you out of your goddamn mind?" I was like, "Oh, dude, I'm so sorry. My bad. I'm sorry. I thought Ryan was here." You know, he's like, "No. He's like, "You close that door." And the girl's like, "Nah, it's okay." And he's like, "No. You really have disrespected me. We're gonna walk up to the parking lot, and I'm gonna kick your ass." I was like, "Dude, we don't have to. We've hung out. Like, we don't have to do this. Come on, I'm really sorry. It was a big mistake." He's like, "No, you have crossed a serious line. Just thinking you can walk in here like that."
Chuck Liddell calls it a fighting offense. You've made a fighting offense, and
he might have been right. You know, like, I can't. Looking back on it, I can't really deny that. You know, I was his residence, and I was just like, what? And after, like, 5-10 minutes of trying to negotiate with this guy, I walked up to the parking lot and he kicked my ass. Like, I didn't just get on the ball and let him but I at least, like, put my hands up, and he beat the shit out of me. He didn't go as hard as he clearly could. I mean, he didn't put me in the hospital. But in that time, my friend that was his roommate came home, okay, and saw this, and he's like, "Oh, what happened?" And this guy told and he's like, "Oh, okay." And the black guy dusted me off, put his arm around me, walked me downstairs, and we all hung out, and we never had a problem. And I learned, and somewhere down the line, we were a little bit buzzed, and he told me, he's like, if you just, like, ran away and got in your car and never came back, he's like, "I'm gonna never allow you back in this house." He's like, the fact that you at least dug your heels in and took it, he's like, that shows something. And like, that stuck with me for a long time. It stuck with me for a long, like, one of the things that I could look back on and really feel proud of, or feel like I developed as a human, was losing. I was getting my ass kicked.
You don't learn anything when you win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why we are so risk averse these days, because we're uncomfortable with suffering and uncomfortable with losing. And that's why we're fucking stupid, and weak. You might be right, but I think that's another huge point you'd like to get across. I'd like to get across to young men. Bill Clinton wrote in his book, which was like a really pretentious pile of nonsense, but one thing that stuck with me was that he said the greatest thing that ever happened to him in his professional career was the first time he ran for Oklahoma
Arkansas governor. He got smashed. Like got 8% of the vote. And he says the greatest thing that ever happened to him. And that from there on out, his career meant something because he knew and he learned. And he's like, I was arrogant. I graduated top of my class and I was kicking ass and I did this and I was arrogant and complacent and I got my ass handed to me and I stepped my game up, Like there's no one that's done anything that you admire as a young man. There's zero people that you look at that had this uniformly awesome upward mobility towards the place that they're at where I'm by far from like Howard Stern or something, but the first 20 times I was on the radio, it was fucking unlistenable. It was ridiculous.
It takes a while to get a rhythm for sure.
Kirk Hammett, Kevin and Bean, who is a radio show, the morning show I worked with, they used to do these things called breakfast withs, and it would be breakfast with like these huge bands, and it would be early in the morning, and they'd play songs, and then an interview in between songs. And we did Metallica one time, and it was in this really small venue, and I was off the stage, but sitting right next to where Kirk Hammett was set up with his rig and everything. So in the commercial breaks, I would try to talk to Kirk Hammett, and he's like blah 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 blah. But yeah, I'm gonna try to fly back to my house in Northern California before we head on tour because I got school. I'm like, oh, you're going back to school? That's awesome, man. What are you, like a community college? He's like, no, guitar school. I was like, I'm sorry, Kirk Hammett. And this is Death Magnetic Metallica. He's not 20. He has 500 million records sold.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I can't assume I'm ever I can't get better or get worse. He's like, I could definitely get worse. So I study. I try to, involve different styles of music. I was like, whoa. It really stuck with me. Like Kirk Hammett, at that point in his life, is studying guitar.
Yeah, no shit. I mean, I guess if you just base it on records sold, the best metal guitarists of all time.
Oh, absolutely. Or at least if you're going off of money made, heck yeah. Him and Slash maybe.
I don't think Slash is anywhere in that ballpark. Probably.
Yeah, because they didn't have as many albums. Yeah, you're right.
It's. That's a good lesson to learn, man. I mean, none of this. What's any documentary or any kind of, especially when we were young, when there wasn't quite as much about people's social life available. The story about Michael Jordan was he got cut from his varsity team when he was a sophomore. Yeah, that's his fucking origin story as a villain or hero, whatever, however you feel about him. But that's his origin story. Is that he thought he was better than everybody else, and he showed up and got smacked in the face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's an important part of character development to realize how not prepared you are for something. That is the physical manifestation of the anxiety in your head telling you need to get better, right? That's when it becomes real. When somebody's like, fucking you, just knock your ass out. Like, oh shit, I thought I was good at this.
And it meant so much to me hearing George St. Pierre talk about being bullied, and that's why he wanted to charge. Mm-hmm. Mike Tyson, he was tired of getting picked on. Yeah. And, so many people will just resort to the extremes as opposed to just being and saying, like, there's got to be a boxing gym around here somewhere. Sure. There's got to, and it's like, maybe I'll make more of myself. And you may never end up getting that bully back, but who cares? You will transform yourself as a human being, and that's worth its weight in gold.
It is, yeah. And it's... Yeah, it's you don't necessarily need to get revenge. I don't think that's a good idea.
I mean, Henry Rollins and I had this conversation, and not to name drop, but it's meaningful that it was him, and we were talking about Pumping Iron, and it was Slayer was on his old. He used to have a show on IFC, and Slayer was the musical guest. So everyone in the LA scene knew that I was like, so they called over to K-Rock. You want to come by? And I was like, hell yeah. So they did a bunch of takes, and Henry and I were just chit chatting. And we were talking about lift. He's like, I can't lift heavy anymore. And he's always Henry. He's always like, I can't lift heavy anymore, even though I want to. But, I'm old. But he was talking, he said, everyone was always so confused, especially in that punk rock world, in the early hardcore, where it was like, you fucking jock, you musclehead. And he's like, I didn't do it so that I could be buff or have abs or kick ass. He's like, it was the first thing where my parents, a teacher, a judge couldn't get in the way. And it was just between me and the weights. And I made more of myself. I would look in the mirror and be like, I did this voluntarily, and look, this is the results. And it made me it changed the way I looked at myself. And like I can't express how much that means. And if I could impart that message to people, it's like the fitness world is out there on the internet with all the wacky workouts and the girls with the big butts and the guys with the abs. But it's really, if you can absorb that and take what's good from it, it can be life changing. If you feel substandard and you commit yourself to doing that, and you become strong, you become muscular, like it's so empowering.
Yeah.
In every facet of your life.
Well, it's one of the iron laws of life. The weight doesn't get lighter, you get stronger.
Yeah.
That's how it works, right? It's like physics isn't going to change, bud. Pressure creates diamonds. You know what I mean? And if the pressure in society, it's different now than it used to be. It's not about just, as a young man, it's not just about providing or protecting. Masculinity is under attack, so it's your job to be the best version of masculine and the most of it you can be. That is the pressure that's going to turn you into a diamond as an adult, right? Or if you're an adult, it's going to make you a diamond at some point. You know what I mean?
Resilience is it's like,
that's all of life.
That's all there is to it, right? That's all that we as men, when you look at other men, you go, well, that's the guy I respect. I don't think his physique or how good he is at jiu-jitsu or how tough he is as a fighter or how much he served, that's not really ever really factoring in. Sometimes it is involved, but really it's resilience. It's like, look what life did to that guy, and he just said, I'm still standing. I may never be the hammer, but you better believe I'm never going to stop being this nail. You can keep hammering me, and I'm going to keep coming.
Yeah. And you're doing. Tell me about the shows you're doing now before we get out of here. You got a couple of newish ventures.
Yeah. So I've been doing my podcast, Mikey Likes You. It's like health and fitness based, but that's a really saturated market. So I wanted to do something that I really felt like someone who's stage ready, does all the drugs, and is looking to take their diuretics and water manipulate, like they could still find it interesting.
Yeah.
But the person who's never worked out in their life and is probably intimidated by like gym culture would also be into it. Because I looked at like health and fitness, the physical aspect's a big portion, but it's not all of it.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you deal with the stress of your life? Like developing recovery practices when your wife's fucking on your case, or you're going through a divorce, or your boss is a prick, like that. All of that stuff factors in, and so few people in the fitness world like to put that in, and addiction and recovery, and just like self-worth and your self-image. All of that stuff is equally, if not more important than like how much you can bench.
Well, it's the resilience, right? I mean, it's like, this is society. Society has its expectations. It's society, to include the people around me, have their expectations, and I have my skill set, and I need to get above this somehow, right? And over the past couple of decades or so, instead of fighting to get above it, we've become more comfortable with the excuses we've made for not being able to, or not having the drive, rather, to actually do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? You get the same dopamine reward from being a victim now that you used to get for being first place. That's fucked. So it has to turn around. It has to turn. And the only way to do it is for other dudes to hold each other accountable and project strength back to women again, so they will start openly seeking that again. Because that's the way the fucking cycle's supposed to work. It's almost like siphoning gas out of a gas tank or something. You have to, that initial act has to happen. Something physical, like Newton's law. It's like we need an act or we need an action to be an equal and opposite reaction to that. We need it badly.
No, it's a good point. And especially when you talk about like our relationship with Win. It's another thing, man, when you're so inundated. I'm sure you're the same way. When I was a boy and I potentially wanted to go be alone in the bathroom with some lube, like Victoria's Secret catalog was,
it doesn't matter
off
what it
the
was.
charts.
Oh, yeah.
That was like a home run.
Yeah.
And now when you're just so inundated with like insanely hot chicks, I would like to say this. I understand chasing after hot chicks, and I encourage you to do that if that's. But realize when it comes to making a relationship, you can find the smoking hot, just the most insane chick you've ever seen. But if she treats you like shit, you have done yourself the most massive disservice, and you are not respecting women in a total way, because you have to think about, like, obviously finding a woman physically attractive is very important, and you should do, but you have to find a woman that you find physically attractive, that you know when you get stomach cancer, she's going to wipe your ass.
Yeah.
When you have shit running down your leg, and she's not going to complain. Or when you lose your job and you guys have to sell, shit hits the fan. Who's that woman that's going to be there for you? Because that's how you got to measure it, man. And so many guys are just consumed with these like girls that like, it happens a lot in LA where they're professionally hot. They're not. They're not models.
Yeah.
They're not actors.
No.
They're professional. They go to the Laker game and they go to a club, and you're like, how do you make? And they're like, this guy pays for this, and that guy pays for that. And I'm like, oh, and guys just throw, and it's our fault. It's guys' fault because they just. And I was like, think beyond, because there are those women out there who will make you a better man.
Yep.
And sometimes those scorching hot chicks aren't going to be that girl.
No, there's no correlation between the two.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
There's crossover. I mean, I'm sure there's
plenty of crossover.
I'm sure there's 10s that are awesome chicks too.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying, but it's alluring the professionally hot chick.
Yeah, and I think that's probably to some degree always been a threat, because dudes are dumbasses. You know what I mean? I mean, if nature chose to motivate us with our dicks, so you can blame nature for some of this shit at least, but so it's not new. But I do think you mentioned dating apps earlier, looking at potential mates like in a catalog with all their stats listed right there, and deciding like fucking Emperor Nero, thumbs up or thumbs down on them. I think that's warping people's brains.
And I am I'm the grossest
piece
guy
of
ever.
shit. I was
I'm
a total
the
piece of shit
grossest
too, yeah.
single guy. I screwed all of Southern California. That's not my point, but the idea of like looking at the opposite sex like that and being like, yes, it's so dystopian.
It's weird.
It's so gross. You know,
I don't think it's good for anybody.
I agree.
Well, look, we got to get out of here. Tell everybody where they can find you and find all your shows.
At Mike Catherwood on Instagram and I guess Threads too now. That's always the best place to find me. The show is Mikey Likes You. I have it at Mikey Likes You 1. The number 1 is the show handle for the Instagram, but also like everything's at Mike Catherwood is the best place to get me.
And let's pressure Dr. Drew to start Loveline back up again as a podcast. I'm sure he's in.
I can't blame him. He's working hard and he travels a lot, but he's on board, and we've been pushing together. I've had to do a lot of the legwork, but we really want to resuscitate Loveline because, it just terrestrial radio, I think everyone can understand. It got to a point where like we were shooting ourselves in the foot trying to do it. Couldn't be the best show it could be. It just got to the point. Yeah. And so now with the way that the internet and the way that like modern media is the alternative media as it's looked like, we could have a bigger, better show than ever before.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to it. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming today.
I sincerely appreciate you inviting me, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
anytime. And thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.